My name is Emily Grant, and I'm 29 years old. Last Thursday morning at 6:42 a.m., my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice broke before she even said the words. "Sweetheart, your grandmother's gone." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My grandmother, Margaret Grant, wasn't just family, she was my anchor. After my parents' divorce, she'd taken me in, made me pancakes every morning, and called me her little shadow. She was the one person who never left. The room felt too quiet, too still. I sat there on the edge of my bed, clutching the phone, hearing only my mother's sobs. After I hung up, I called Ethan, my fiance. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. He was still half asleep when he answered. "Babe, my grandma, she passed away this morning." There was a pause, a long one. "Oh, when's the funeral?" I frowned. "We haven't said it yet. Probably this weekend. I'm the executor, so I have to make the arrangements. This weekend, like Saturday or Sunday, Ethan, she just died." Silence again. Then, okay, just let me know. By the time the sun came up, I was knee-deep in logistics funeral home. Family calls, legal paperwork. It's strange how grief gets buried under forms and signatures. By 2:00 p.m., the service was set for Saturday. At 11:00 a.m., I texted him. Funeral. Saturday, 11 a.m. at Greenwood Chapel. I'll send details. At 5:18 p.m., my phone buzzed. Ethan. So I can't make Saturday. My Coachella tickets were $850 and they're non-refundable. Your grandma would totally understand. She'd want me to enjoy life. I'll light a candle for her at the festival. Sorry, babe. I stared at the message for a full minute, then another, then another. My grandmother, the woman who'd taught me to drive, stayed up all night during my first heartbreak and attended every graduation, every promotion, every small victory was gone. And my fiance was choosing a music festival because he didn't want to lose $850. My fingers trembled as I typed back. Understood. A minute later, another notification popped up. Ethan, OMG, thank you for being so chill about this. I knew you'd get it. Love you. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my grandmother's will. I'd seen it before I was listed as executor, but this time I looked closer. Her estate was worth around $180,000 after selling her house. Most was going to my mom and my uncle, but there was a specific clause that had always made her smile whenever she mentioned it. To my beloved granddaughter and her husband-to-be, I leave $40,000 to help them begin their married life. At the time, it had felt sweet, generous. Now, reading it again, it felt like something else entirely, a question I hadn't realized I'd have to answer, because I wasn't sure I wanted to be anyone's bride-to-be anymore. That evening, I sat alone in my grandmother's living room, the same room where she'd read her mystery novels every Sunday afternoon. Her scent still lingered in the air, lavender and peppermint tea. I looked at the framed photos on her bookshelf, birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. Ethan was in several of them, smiling like he belonged, and now he couldn't even bother to show up to say goodbye. My mother called again around 9. She was crying softly but holding herself together. The florist confirmed. "I'll take care of the reception afterward, honey. You don't have to do everything." "It's fine, Mom," I said quietly. "I want to." When we hung up, I sat staring at the engagement ring on my finger. The diamond glinted under the lamplight, beautiful and cold. In my mind, I could still hear my grandmother's voice from just a month ago. "You can tell a lot about a person by how they handle loss, Emily. The right one will hold your hand when life hurts the most." My throat tightened. The right one would show up. I scrolled back to Ethan's text, the one about the candle. She'd want me to enjoy life. My grandmother would never have said that. She believed in presents and casseroles delivered to grieving neighbors, in handwritten sympathy cards, in hugs that lasted long enough to steady someone's heart. Not in lighting a candle between sets at a music festival. I opened a new folder on my laptop titled Estate Documents and began organizing everything for the lawyer. Then, almost without thinking, I took a screenshot of Ethan's text message and saved it there too. The cursor blinked beside the file name. I typed proof, priorities. Outside, the night was quiet. The city lights flickered across the window, and I wondered how many people were out there right now, living their lives completely unaware that someone else's world had just stopped turning. My phone buzzed again. Ethan. Ethan. "Hey, babe, what time is the burial?" "I might still make it if I leave early Sunday morning. Depends on traffic, LOL. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I set the phone face down and whispered, "Don't bother. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, my grandmother, smiling across the kitchen table, sunlight in her silver hair. And next to her, the empty chair where Ethan should have been. By dawn, I knew something had shifted inside me. Grief had started to turn into clarity, sharp and unrelenting. Ethan's absence wasn't about the funeral anymore. It was about everything else he'd ever skipped every time he'd said, next time, every plan he'd postponed when it wasn't convenient. My grandmother used to say love isn't measured by words, it's measured by who shows up. As the first light touched the windowsill, I whispered to the empty room he chose music over mourning. And I knew this wasn't just about losing my grandmother. It was about losing someone who'd never really been there at all. Saturday came faster than I was ready for. The sun rose pale and cold that morning, like even the sky was reluctant to shine. I dressed quietly, black dress, simple pearl earrings, the ones Grandma had given me for my college graduation. When I arrived at Greenwood Chapel, the parking lot was already full. Over 100 people had come, neighbors, book club friends, church members, even her old co-workers from the library. Everyone was there, everyone except Ethan. Inside, the scent of lilies filled the air. The organist played a soft hymn while people found their seats. I stood near the casket, greeting each person with a polite nod, offering tissue after tissue. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, they said. She was proud of you. She talked about your engagement all the time. Each kind word pressed against my chest like a stone. When my uncle began his eulogy, my eyes drifted to the back of the chapel. I half expected Ethan to walk in at the last minute late, but there the way he always was. But the door stayed closed. Afterward, during the reception, relatives approached me with cautious smiles. "Where's your fiance, dear?" one of my cousins asked, balancing a plate of casseroles. I swallowed. "He couldn't make it." "Oh," she tilted her head. "Everything all right between you two?" I smiled tightly. He had prior plans. Her brows knitted, but she didn't push. An hour later, when most of the guests had gone, I was still standing near the photo display, old snapshots of Grandma through the years. Her best friend Mabel came up beside me. She'd known Grandma for 50 years. "Honey," she said softly, laying a wrinkled hand over mine. "If he's not here for this, he won't be there for anything." I didn't answer, because deep down I already knew she was right. That evening, after everyone left, I returned home to silence. The black dress hung over the chair. My phone buzzed on the counter, 32 unread messages, all from Ethan. "How did it go? I'm sure it was beautiful. Your mom's Facebook photos look nice. By the way, my parents were asking about the inheritance thing your grandma mentioned. How much are we getting exactly? Found this amazing wedding venue with a waterfall. It's $45,000, but with your grandma's money, we can totally afford it. Need to put down a deposit soon, babe." I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. My grandmother had been in the ground for 4 hours. 4 hours. And he was already planning how to spend her money. Grief gave way to something colder, a kind of quiet rage that doesn't explode but simmers just beneath the skin. I walked into my office, turned on my laptop, and opened the estate folder again. The will, the legal notes, my screenshots. I added a new document titled Executor Notes, Conditional Bequest. Inside, I wrote one line. The bequest is intended for a spouse who honors family, not one who values money over mourning. I saved it. My phone buzzed again. Ethan calling this time. I let it ring out. Then the voicemail played, his voice bright and casual. "Hey, babe. Sorry I missed today. The set list was insane. I swear your grandma would have loved the energy here. Anyway, can we talk about wedding dates? Love you." I deleted it without listening to the rest. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with Grandma's framed photo in my hands. She was laughing in it, the kind of laugh that made everyone around her join in. I pressed my forehead against the glass and whispered, "You deserve better." When I finally crawled under the blanket, exhaustion hit me like a wave. But before I closed my eyes, I reached for my phone again, not to reply to Ethan, but to scroll through old text threads with Grandma. Months ago, she'd sent me a message after Ethan had missed my cousin's birthday dinner because of work stuff. "Grandma family is who shows up, sweetheart. Remember that." I had brushed it off at the time. Now it echoed in my mind like a verdict. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of rain. The sky was gray heavy. My mom came over with muffins and coffee. She sat at the kitchen table and said quietly, "You held yourself together yesterday. Grandma would have been proud." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Thanks, Mom." She hesitated. "Will Ethan be coming by today?" I looked out the window where the rain slid down the glass like tears. "I don't think so." She studied me, then just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Good. After she left, I went into the living room and started sorting through Grandma's boxes, recipes, old letters, trinkets. At the bottom of one box, tucked between two photo albums, was an envelope with my name on it. For Emily open when I'm gone. My heart jumped. I sat down slowly, tearing the envelope open. Inside was a single page written in her delicate, shaky handwriting. My dearest Emily. If you're reading this, it means I'm already where pain can't reach me anymore. Don't waste your heart on people who treat love like a convenience. The ones who truly care will stand beside you when life hurts. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shows up even when it's uncomfortable. You've always had a good head and a kinder heart. Don't let either be taken for granted. Love, Grandma. My throat closed. I pressed the paper to my chest and cried until the ink blurred. Outside, the rain kept falling, gentle but steady, the kind of rain Grandma always said washes the world clean. By evening, I'd made a decision. Love wasn't supposed to feel like an obligation you had to remind someone of. It wasn't about who said I love you the loudest. It was about who showed up when it mattered. And Ethan, he'd shown me exactly who he was. I sat down again at my laptop and began typing a message to my grandmother's attorney. Subject clarification on conditional bequest. Hi, Mr. Jacobs. Quick question. If the named fiancé and I don't marry before the estate closes, does that portion revert to the main estate? I hovered over send for a second, then clicked. Somewhere deep inside, I felt Grandma's approval, quiet, calm, certain, because she'd always taught me that love wasn't proven in promises. It was proven in presence, and Ethan had proven his absence. Sunday evening, the apartment felt heavier than usual. The air was thick with that post-funeral silence, the kind where every small sound feels too loud. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through the sympathy messages from friends and family, when I heard a familiar key turning in the lock. Ethan! He walked in like nothing had happened. Sunlight still on his skin, the Coachella wristbands bright around his wrist. Babe, he said, voice cheerful, a tan smile plastered across his face. I missed you so much. He leaned in to hug me, but I didn't move. I just looked at him. Really looked. The man standing in front of me was the same one who'd promised to share a life with me, but suddenly I couldn't find a trace of warmth in him. He sat down beside me, oblivious to the tension. So he said, pulling out his phone, the funeral looked okay. Your mom posted a few pictures on Facebook. The flowers were really pretty. I turned to him, my voice steady. You didn't come. He blinked. We talked about this. The tickets were non-refundable, M. And your grandma was all about living life to the fullest. She wouldn't have wanted me sitting around being sad. I stared at him, stunned. She was dead, Ethan. Dead. And you think the right choice was a music festival? He sighed, leaning back. You're making it sound worse than it is. It's not like me being there would have changed anything. The casual cruelty in his tone snapped something inside me. Get out, I said quietly. He froze. What? Get out of my apartment. Leave your key on the counter. He laughed like I was joking. Come on, Emily. Don't be dramatic. I said I was sorry. I stood up, my voice sharper now. You missed her funeral for a concert, Ethan. For a weekend of drinking and music while I was burying the only person who ever truly showed up for me. He raised his hands. Okay. You're upset, I get it. But this doesn't change the fact that we're engaged, right? I mean, your grandma wanted us to have that money. It's for us, Em. For our future. The words that money made my stomach turn. What money? I asked flatly. He frowned. The 40,000. You said she left it for us, right? So, what's the timeline on that? Because I already put down a deposit on a venue. It's amazing waterfall backdrop. String lights, the whole thing. My voice came out calm, too calm. You put down a deposit. Yeah, just $500 to hold the date. My credit card, don't worry. Once the inheritance comes through, there won't be any inheritance. He blinked. What are you talking about? The clause says, to my granddaughter and her husband-to-be. We're not married, Ethan, and we won't be. So the money reverts back to the estate. He stared at me, jaw tightening. You're joking. I'm not. You can't just decide that. His voice rose. That money was meant for us. Your grandma adored me. She adored the version of you that pretended to care. His face flushed red. You can't just erase me from her will. I don't have to. You erased yourself when you didn't show up. He slammed his hand on the table. You're unbelievable. You think you can punish me over one mistake. One mistake, I repeated. Ethan, it wasn't forgetting to take out the trash. It was my grandmother's funeral. He laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. You're insane. You'd throw away everything we've built over this. What did we build, Ethan? A relationship that falls apart when it's inconvenient. He paced the living room, muttering curses under his breath. Then he turned on me, voice low and venomous. You know what? My father's a lawyer. He'll make sure you can't just steal that inheritance from me. I tilted my head. Steal? You mean the money that was never legally yours? He sneered. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Acting like you're better than everyone because you're grieving? Newsflash, Emily, your grandma's gone. She's not coming back, and me being there wouldn't have changed a damn thing. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words hit like slaps. Then I said quietly but firmly, leave. He just stared. Get out. Now. He grabbed the mug from the counter, his tea half finished, and hurled it toward the sink. It hit the backsplash and shattered, splattering tea across the white tiles. You're going to regret this, he said. His face twisted with anger. No, I said softly. You will. He stood there for a second longer, chest heaving, then ripped the key off his keychain and threw it onto the table. It clattered between us like a full stop at the end of something long overdue. When the door finally slammed behind him, the echo lingered in the quiet apartment. I stood there shaking not from fear, but from release. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. I answered anyway. Emily Grant, a woman's voice snapped. Yes, this is Mrs. Walker. What did you do to my son? He's hysterical. I broke up with him. You broke up with him over a funeral. Over one missed weekend. No, I said. Over a pattern. Over what it revealed. You owe him that inheritance money. He's been planning for your life together. I don't owe him anything. The money was meant for my spouse, and he isn't one. You're heartless, she hissed. My son loved your grandmother like his own. Then he should have shown up to her funeral. Silence, then a click. I set the phone down and sat on the couch, my hands still trembling slightly. The apartment felt impossibly quiet. No music, no laughter, no Ethan. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. It should have hurt more than it did, but instead I felt calm, like something heavy had finally lifted off my chest. I walked over to the table, picked up the ring he'd left behind, and slid it into a drawer. Then I opened my grandmother's letter again. The ink had faded slightly where my tears had fallen the day before, but one line stood out clear and steady. Don't waste your heart on people who treat love like convenience. I whispered into the quiet, I won't, Grandma. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, reflecting a version of me that looked older, not in years, but in knowing. For the first time in days, I felt something that almost resembled peace, because grief had taught me something love never had. Silence reveals the truth louder than words ever could. And in the silence of that night, I finally understood what my grandmother meant. Family isn't who promises to show up. It's who actually does. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Ms. Grant, yes. This is Attorney Hoffman representing Mr. Ethan Walker and his family. His tone was clipped, rehearsed. We need to discuss the estate situation. I took a slow breath. There's nothing to discuss. I believe there's been some misunderstanding regarding your late grandmother's bequest. No misunderstanding, I said evenly. The will specifies that the funds go to my spouse. Ethan and I are no longer engaged. He's not my spouse. He hesitated, perhaps unused to calm resistance. My client believes there was an implied contract, a promise of marriage and shared assets. Implied contracts don't apply to wills, I replied. And your client's absence at a funeral doesn't inspire much sympathy in probate court. Ms. Grant, we intend to pursue this if necessary. Then I suggest you start by explaining to a judge why your client was dancing at Coachella while my grandmother was being buried. There was a pause, then he sighed. You'll be hearing from us. When the line went dead, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window, pale, tired, but steady. He wasn't even grieving yet. Somehow he wanted to profit from my loss. I called Mr. Jacobs, my grandmother's attorney, immediately after. He'd been with the family for 30 years, the kind of man who still used fountain pens and signed his emails. Warm regards. Good morning, Emily, he said when he picked up. You sound remarkably composed for someone under siege. Ethan's family hired a lawyer. They're threatening to sue. He chuckled softly. Let them. They have no standing. The clause is crystal clear, funds to be distributed to you and your husband-to-be. Since no marriage occurred and you're the executor, you can reabsorb the amount into the main estate. That's what I thought, I said, relief flooding me. However, he added, his tone sharpening, if you'd like to prevent any future nuisance, I can file a formal exclusion clause. It will legally document that Ethan Walker is barred from claiming or contesting any part of the estate. I hesitated. Can we really do that? Given the circumstances. Absolutely. You have written proof of his absence in statements that qualify as disrespect toward the decedent. That's more than enough justification. I closed my eyes for a moment. Do it. I'll draft it today. We'll attach the text message about Coachella as evidence. When I hung up, I almost laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. Ethan had turned grief into paperwork. By noon, the emails started coming. First from Ethan's father. We expect you to handle this like an adult. This was Margaret's wish. Then Ethan himself, I made one mistake and you're destroying my life. You owe me that money. I didn't respond. Instead, I screenshotted each message and forwarded them to Mr. Jacobs. That evening, as I was walking up to my apartment building, I spotted him, Ethan, leaning against his car in the parking lot waiting. My pulse quickened, but I kept walking. He stepped forward. We need to talk. No, we don't. He followed me toward the door. Emily, come on. My dad says you're overreacting. We were practically married. Practically isn't legally, I said without turning. He reached for my arm. I stopped cold and his hand froze midair. Don't touch me. He dropped his hand and exhaled sharply. Look, I messed up. I know that. But you can't just erase everything we had. I gave you 3 years. I helped with bills repairs. You also chose a concert over standing beside me at my grandmother's funeral. It was one day he snapped. Yes, I said quietly, meeting his eyes. The day I needed you most. For a moment, the mask slipped. Panic flickered across his face. You can't do this to me. I already told people about the money. I have plans. That's the problem, Ethan. You made plans with someone else's legacy. He stared at me, jaw clenched. You're cold. No, I said softly. I'm done. He hesitated, then his voice changed smooth, almost pleading. Please, Em, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll go to therapy. I'll make it up to you. We need that money for our future. There is no we, and there is no future. The kindness drained from his face. Fine, he said, voice trembling with fury. Then you'll regret this. You can't rewrite her will just because you're bitter. I'm not rewriting anything. I'm protecting it. From what? From people who only show up for the payout. He stared at me one last time, eyes dark, jaw tight. This isn't over. Yes, I said, unlocking my door. It is. He turned and stormed off, his car engine roaring as he sped away. Inside, I sank onto the couch, shaking again, not from fear this time, but from exhaustion. I knew he'd keep pushing, keep grasping at whatever thread of control he thought he had left. But now I also knew I had something he didn't, the truth. A few hours later, Mr. Jacobs emailed me a draft of the exclusion clause. Based on the executor's discretion and documented evidence, the following individual, Ethan Walker, is formally excluded from any claim to this estate. Reason: failure to attend the decedent's funeral services, choosing instead to attend a music festival. This demonstrates fundamental disrespect toward the decedent and disqualifies the individual from any benefit under this will or estate. I stared at the document until the words blurred. Then I exhaled, hit reply, and wrote, Approved. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something like relief. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes from finally setting a boundary you should have set long ago. I turned off my laptop and walked to the window. The city below was alive, glittering with lights and movement. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably spinning another story about the crazy ex who stole his inheritance. But I didn't care, because the truth was written down now, permanent, legal, undeniable. And when the will was read, the truth would finally speak for itself. 3 weeks later, the sky was the same dull gray. It had been the morning of the funeral, heavy, expectant, like it knew something was about to break. The will reading was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. on a Wednesday at Mr. Jacobs's law office downtown. I got there 15 minutes early. My mom was already in the waiting room, holding a tissue and a worn copy of Grandma's favorite book. She smiled when she saw me, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. You ready for this? She asked. I nodded. I've been ready since the day he skipped her funeral. My uncle and aunt arrived next, then my 2 cousins. We filled one side of the long wooden conference table, the air thick with nerves and quiet anticipation. At 2:04 p.m., the glass door opened and in walked Ethan, flanked by his parents. He'd traded his festival bracelets for a navy suit and slicked back hair, trying to look composed, respectable. His mother's jaw was tight, her eyes sharp with rehearsed outrage. His father carried a briefcase and the smug expression of a man who believed he was about to win. They sat across from us without a word. Ethan's eyes met mine for half a second, but he looked away first. Mr. Jacobs entered moments later, adjusting his glasses as he took his seat at the head of the table. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll proceed with the reading of Margaret Grant's last will and testament." He began with the standard legal preamble dates, witnesses' validity clauses. The rhythm of his voice was measured and calm, as if he'd done this 1,000 times. "To my daughter, I leave my home and its contents with sale proceeds totaling $60,000. My mother's eyes filled, her fingers trembling slightly as she dabbed her tears with the tissue. "To my son, I leave $60,000 and my collection of first edition books." My uncle nodded quietly, his wife squeezing his hand. Mr. Jacobs continued, "To my beloved granddaughter, Emily Grant, I leave $40,000, my wedding ring, set, and a letter to be delivered separately." A lump rose in my throat. That letter, I'd already read it. It was the one she'd written by hand, the one that had reminded me who I was. But then Jacobs added clearly, evenly, "The will originally contained a provision for $40,000 to my granddaughter and her husband-to-be. However, as no marriage has occurred, and under the executor's discretionary authority, that bequest reverts to the primary beneficiary." Ethan's mother blinked. "Excuse me?" Jacobs calmly turned the page. "Additionally, per executor discretion and documented evidence, the following individual is formally excluded from any claim to this estate." He adjusted his glasses and read the name aloud. "Ethan Walker." The words dropped into the room like a thunderclap. Ethan froze. His face went pale, then red. What Jacobs continued, his tone still neutral. "The reason for exclusion: failure to attend the decedent's funeral services on April 22nd, choosing instead to attend a music festival. This action demonstrates a fundamental lack of respect for the decedent and disqualifies the individual from any benefit under this will or estate. Supporting documentation includes time-stamped text message evidence." He lifted a page from the folder and began to read. Quote, "My Coachella tickets were $850 and they're non-refundable. Your grandma would totally understand." End quote. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's mother's mouth dropped open. His father's smugness vanished, replaced by a nervous flush creeping up his neck. My mom exhaled almost a sigh of release. My uncle whispered under his breath, "Good for her." Ethan pushed his chair back so suddenly it screeched against the tile. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "That money was meant for me." Jacobs didn't even flinch. "Mr. Walker, the funds were intended for Mrs. Grant's granddaughter and spouse. You were neither. I was going to be," he snapped. "Intent does not override legal status," Jacobs replied calmly. Ethan's father jumped in, his voice rising. "You can't just humiliate my son like this. There's precedent for implied inheritance." Jacobs raised a hand. "Counselor, you're a lawyer. You know as well as I do that there's no standing here. Your client is not a beneficiary, not a spouse, and due to the exclusion clause, is barred from future claims." Ethan's father's mouth opened, then closed again. Across the table, Ethan's mother started whispering rapidly, trying to calm her son, but he jerked away, glaring at me. "You did this," he hissed. "You made her write that clause." "She wrote the will years ago," I said quietly. "I just enforced her wishes." "Wishes." His voice cracked. "She loved me. She wanted us to be happy. She wanted you to show up." I said, my voice trembling but clear. "And you didn't." For a moment he looked like he might shout again, but then my mother stood. Her voice, soft but shaking with emotion, filled the room. "My mother opened her home to you, Ethan. She fed you at her table, included you in every holiday, treated you like her own grandson. And when we laid her to rest, you were at a concert. You don't deserve her money. You don't even deserve to say her name." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Mr. Jacobs looked moved. Ethan's face crumpled. His mother rose suddenly, grabbing her purse. "We're leaving. This is a farce." Jacobs nodded politely. "That's your right." As they gathered their things, Ethan turned to me one last time. "You'll regret this. You think this makes you noble? You just look bitter." I met his eyes. "No, I just look done." They stormed out the glass door, slamming hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. The air in the conference room felt lighter, immediately cleaner, like something toxic had been scrubbed away. Jacobs cleared his throat softly. Shall we continue? The rest was procedural signatures, copies, acknowledgments. It took 10 minutes. When it was over, my mom hugged me tight. You did the right thing, she whispered. Your grandmother would be proud. I just followed her words, I said quietly. She always said family is who shows up. In the parking lot, my uncle pulled me aside. That was brutal, he said, but necessary. You stood up for her when she couldn't stand up for herself. I nodded, feeling that same strange mixture of sadness and peace. She would have done the same for me. Before we left, Mr. Jacobs handed me a sealed envelope. This is the personal letter Mrs. Grant wanted you to have after the reading. Wait until you're home. I took it with both hands. Thank you. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the empty space where Ethan's car had been minutes before. The storm that had hung over my head for weeks was finally clearing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was just free, because justice doesn't always come from courtrooms or lawyers. Sometimes it comes from a grandmother's will and a granddaughter who finally learned to enforce it. That night, after everything was over, I went home and sat at my kitchen table. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that finally feels peaceful instead of empty. The envelope Mr. Jacobs had given me rested in front of me, cream paper. My grandmother's familiar handwriting across the front. For Emily after it's all done. I traced the letters with my finger before opening it. Inside was a single folded page and a faint scent of her lavender perfume. My hands shook as I unfolded it. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've had to make choices that tested your heart. I hope you chose truth over comfort. I hope you stood up for what was right even when it was hard. I know you've always been kind, maybe too kind. But don't let people mistake your kindness for weakness. There will be those who want what you have, and others who only show up when it benefits them. Let them go. I'm leaving you this money not just to build a life, but to remind you that you already have the strength to protect it. If you're married when you read this, I'm happy for you. If you're not, I trust there's a good reason. You've always known right from wrong. And remember, sweetheart, family is who shows up. Love you forever, Grandma. The tears came quietly this time. Not the gasping, aching sobs of grief, but something gentler. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my chest. I whispered, I did what you'd want, Grandma. I chose truth. The days that followed were strangely calm. Word spread fast in our small town. People had questions, of course. Gossip always travels quicker than kindness. But most already knew the truth. Ethan had gone to Coachella instead of Grandma's funeral, and then tried to claim her inheritance. Ethan's father filed a complaint with the state bar against Mr. Jacobs. It was dismissed in a week. Then he tried to contest the will itself. The judge threw it out in less than 10 minutes. It cost them nearly $5,000 in filing fees and court costs. Next came a desperate civil suit, intentional infliction of emotional distress. That lasted all of 15 minutes before the judge said, you can't be emotionally distressed by not getting money that was never yours. Another $3,000 gone. After that, nothing. No calls, no letters, just silence. I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan had moved back in with his parents. He'd quit his job right before the funeral, assuming he'd have the inheritance money to coast for a few months. Now he was scrambling to find work. His parents, embarrassed by the lawsuits, had started avoiding social events. It was poetic, really. The world had simply corrected itself. As for me, I used the inheritance to buy a small 2-bedroom house on the edge of town. White walls, a garden full of sunlight, and just enough space to breathe. I framed Grandma's letter and hung it in the living room right above her old reading chair. Every Sunday, my mom comes over for dinner. We cook one of Grandma's recipes, talk about her stories, and laugh at her old sayings. Don't lend books or boyfriends, you'll never get either back. That one always makes Mom smile. Sometimes when I catch my reflection in the living room window, I see her in me. Not just in my face, but in my calmness, my boundaries, my refusal to let people take more than they deserve. 6 months later, I met someone new. His name was Daniel. Quiet, thoughtful, a history teacher who brought flowers on our first date because you looked like someone who deserves to be remembered kindly. We took things slow. On our third date, he asked about my family. I told him everything, the loss, the will, Ethan, all of it. He didn't interrupt or offer advice. He just listened. When I finished, he said softly, your grandmother sounds incredible. I think she'd be proud of how you handled it. She would have liked you, I said. You showed up even when it was just for coffee. He smiled. That's what decent people do. We've been together for a year now. He's met my family, helped me repaint the kitchen. Even visits Grandma's grave with me every few weeks. Sometimes people still say I was harsh that I let money come between love, but they're wrong. It was never about the money. It was about what the money revealed. Because when someone loves you, truly loves you, they show up when it matters most, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts. Especially then. Ethan chose a concert over compassion. I chose peace over pretense. Grandma used to say, you'll always know who people are when the world stops being fun. Now I finally understand. So when people ask me when I knew Ethan wasn't the one, I tell them the truth. It wasn't when he lied or when he yelled. It was when he didn't show up. I glance up at the framed letter in my living room every morning before I leave for work. The last line always makes me smile. Family isn't who promises to be there, Emily.